The fear in the market is still very muted when you look at volatility. So even though we're seeing a sell-off on Tuesday after a long weekend, which kind of started on Friday after the bad jobs number, I wouldn't exactly call this a fear-driven run for the exits type sell-off. Now, that doesn't mean it couldn't emerge into one. But there are still so many factors here, particularly in the NASDAQ, those big growth stocks that are just really, I think, at this point, saturated, but also the winners in this and holding up the rest of the market. And of course, it's more complicated than labor. If we just look at labor, for one thing, though, we still have 10.1 million jobs that are not filled. We still have 8.7 million people out of work. We still have, even though the benefits are going away, I think we have a permanent change to the workforce in the United States in that we had 2 million people retire early. We had a whole bunch of people in the hospitality business working now from home doing fulfillment for companies like Amazon. We have people that have become retail investors because on paper, it's looked pretty darn easy since last year once we hit that nadir in the market. Same thing with cryptocurrencies. People are buying all kinds of coins. So even with the incentives and the wage increases and everything else that companies are begging for people to come back to work, what we're really seeing, and hasn't totally impacted the market yet, is what could happen is this labor force not only continues to trigger inflation, but our growth gets stymied. Now, the reason why these big corporations are doing so great is because they also are buying back their own stocks again, too. They're not laying off any people because they don't feel a need to kind of pump their stock price at this point. So, and one more factor, and I apologize for the long answer, but it is a complicated question. And that also is we still have looming there the $3.5 trillion package and the $1 trillion package for infrastructure, neither of which has been fully passed yet and getting going, with Biden's numbers in terms of approval going down. So it's so hard that when you look at all of that, you say, wow, actually the market's holding up pretty well. And I would say a big part of that is because these retail investors just keep buying anything that dips. And maybe that changes one day, but for right now, the fundamentals are only showing positive as far as the variance here, but nobody's really shutting down, at least not in the United States. So the psychology is changing. I think a lot of it has to go back to the Fed, which is the Fed is going to continue to keep the rates low. They're going to keep the bond buying program as long as the labor force is low until such day where inflation becomes such a factor that they have no choice but to do something. And also, if they taper a little bit right now, the market feels like it can handle it. But again, we've got policy here. We've got to find growth beyond the labor market. We've got to find growth from the economy based on infrastructure. I go back to that over and over and over again because it's crumbling in this country. And if we can't get our act together, then I think other than these big tech companies that don't rely on infrastructure, other than, say, 5G, internet access, and all those stocks are flying, that space is so saturated. How much more can it go up without the cooperation of retail and transportation and small caps, industrials, manufacturing, financials? All of those are really lagging. And they're like, well, I don't care what's going on because my 401k is doing great. And as long as my 401k is doing great or my IRA, be that as it may out there, people want nothing more than to just have enough money to take care of their families, to pay their bills, etc. Now, we do have a whole bunch of evictions coming up right now because the landlords that were giving renters moratorium for all these months to have to pay their rent, that's ending too. And that was actually a Supreme Court decision. So there's nowhere to go in terms of the renters there. That too will be interesting to see what happens. So maybe there'll be a sea change because I don't know exactly what the number is. I think it was something like 750,000 people will be evicted over the next 30 to 60 days. If that happens, then will that affect the retail investors? I don't know. Maybe they'll just sit there with their computers and go to Starbucks, go crash on friends' couches, go back and live with their parents. I don't know. But this fearlessness is here. And the only way it will change is two ways. One, if Fed policy changes, Powell's up for renomination. I don't think he's going to get too crazy doing anything until after that. I'm pretty sure he's going to be renominated. And two is if things really change economically, where the dollar, let's say, crashes, and now people have this real inflation concern and their focus switches. We'll see. Right now, on Tuesday, some people say it was technical. And it is possible that what happened was Bitcoin couldn't sustain 50,000 and a lot of people just started to liquidate. But what was interesting is that once it went all the way down, it got met with a lot of buying. But Bitcoin is actually shifting too. We have Solana went to new all-time highs today and has moved up in market cap to number 6 spot. So some of these altcoins, a lot of them went down, but Solana was one that actually went the other way. Ripple or XRP went down, but it then immediately bounced 15 to 18 cents from there. Ethereum went down to 3,000 and immediately bounced close to 3,300 when the last I looked. So this is what we're calling volatility, right? And we didn't have volatility for a while in the crypto market. So this El Salvador event and Reddit calling for everybody to buy, what, $30 worth of Bitcoin at this time of 5 o'clock. I don't know if that's more than just a psychological, really basically reinforcement of what we just talked about, is the fearless retail crowd that essentially you just get enough people to buy and you can't lose. So I think this is maybe a one-day sort of event. I wouldn't look into it.